Welcome back to the Nebraska Shootaround podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Bigelow, the men's basketball beat writer for Varsity. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, Jacob Bigelow, who is a contributor to Huskers Illustrated and former Nebraska manager. Bigelow, how you doing?
Doing well, man. It's kind of get to make our first little voyage down I-80 for basketball season on Sunday. Looking forward to it. I can't believe it's already here, but I'm excited. And we got to hear from Fred today, and I think we might have gotten to the bottom of where his off-season talking points came from.
Yeah, we're recording this the first late night edition of the Nebraska Shootaround podcast recording this late on Thursday after Fred and CJ Welcher talked to the media in advance of their season opening exhibition against Shadron State on Sunday afternoon. You can go to HailVarsity.com for kind of the full write-up from what they had to say and the full videos as well. But yeah, you mentioned you found something that appears to have kind of informed this entire offseason and everything that we talked about on the last episode of the podcast when we talked about kind of the offseason themes and what Hoiberg's been talking about. You want to go ahead and read that and let
absolutely. So there's been a lot of talk around here about metrics and what coaches need to do for some outcomes to come. And this entire offseason, his nickname's the mayor, but he sometimes talks like a politician, just repeating the same talking points, kind of like stump speechy. And those repeated points have been, you're going to love the way this team competes. They compete hard every day. Our fan base is really going to love this team. They're going to be able to get behind this team and support them. And, we're emphasizing fundamentals, little things like that. So I'll give a shout out to the message boards who was doing a little browsing today. And this quote from Trev from an interview last February with Eric Olson of the Associated Press. In regards to basketball, he said, quote, "You don't have to win every game. You really don't. But you better have a team that competes every single night. You better have a team that's fundamentally sound. You have to have a team that plays together, that will never, ever quit, does things the right way, and represents the values and ideals of Nebraska and our alumni." Now that sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that basically every time that Fred Hoiberg has picked up a microphone this offseason.
Yeah, the message has been received, and it has been repeated multiple times throughout the offseason. And I think that can be. There's been questions of, does Fred really want to be here? Does he really, how much does he want to keep coaching? And at least on the surface, he's making it look like he wants to be here and he would like to still be employed by after this season. So that's promising.
Yeah, like you said, message received, attempts made, and now we will see whether or not Hoiberg's able to execute that plan to Trev Albert's, I guess, to what he wants to see. And that'll start the exhibition. Obviously, it doesn't count for anything, but it'll be our first look. We also know it doesn't mean anything based on how the exhibition went last year against Colorado, but it's better than nothing, and it's better than talking about the same things over and over again. But before we get to that, you can consider this the official preview podcast or preview episode of this podcast. We're just going to run through the whole roster, kind of broken up into three groups to just offer some tidbits on each of the players, throw you some stats, some quotes, and then just kind of offer thoughts on top of that. And a lot of stuff on HailVarsity.com that kind of accompanies and goes more in depth on what we're going to talk about today. If you're a subscriber, you can go again read all my kind of off-season player breakdowns using Synergy. We'll kind of tease that a little bit in what we're going to talk about on the episode here. But if you want a full in-depth look at each of the newcomers that played elsewhere last year, somewhere in college, as well as the key returners who played a lot for Nebraska, you can go find those on HailVarsity.com. You got some video clips on top of that to kind of illustrate what the numbers are telling us. So I would encourage you to go read those. But for now, let's kind of dive into it. And we're going to start with, we're going to group these into the ball handlers, kind of the off-ball wings guards, and then the bigs. And I think that's probably kind of a fair way to slice up this roster if we're going to go more general than point guard, shooting guard, small forward, all that. Kind of a little bit bigger groups, but
in today's age of positionless basketball, and this is probably similar to how these guys are characterized by the coaching staff that coaches them, considering they mostly run 4 out, 1 in offense and pace and space. So positionless basketball, this is a good way to break it down. So
yeah, so we'll start with the ball handlers, and obviously the only place that we can start is with Sam Griesel. 6'7", 216 is what he's listed at. Obviously, Fred Hoiberg's talked about the value of having a big point guard, and he mentioned DeAndre Kane that played for him at Iowa State, who had a really good season with him in Ames, and Delano Banton and what he's doing now as a pro. Mentioned we didn't get to see kind of what he was fully capable of at Nebraska because of the COVID deal. And so Fred has, and we obviously know Royce White as well, who is untraditional, but again, a big kind of initiator type. So that's what Sam's going to be. That's what they're hoping for. And just kind of right off top, last year at North Dakota State, he was kind of his breakout year. He made a leap from sophomore to junior year when they kind of transitioned him into that point guard role. But then he made a huge leap from junior to senior, just in terms of overall effectiveness and efficiency. He told me the game really slowed down for him, and that kind of reflected itself in his play. Averaged about 14 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, just 2 turnovers. Shot 48% from the field, including 38% from 3 on just over 2 attempts a game, and about 76% from the line on 5 attempts a game. So he did a good job of drawing contact into the line. Looking at kind of a little bit deeper at his synergy numbers, he averaged 0.992 points per possession. And that is, for context, that's ranked in the 80th percentile of all players in college basketball last season. So he was a very good player for them last year. Obviously, Summit League, we don't know how that'll translate, but you like to start with a player who was good where he's coming from. And he certainly was. And the thing I like about Griesel is how versatile he is, and kind of the play disparity of the way that North Dakota State used him. Nebraska's going to be able to kind of do a lot of the same stuff. Fred Hoiberg said he is going to have the ball in his hands the majority of the time, but he's not a guy that lets it stick. He'll give it up and get it back later in the possession and go make a play, which we didn't see much of last year with Alonzo Verge running the point. His main play type was pick and roll. And as the ball handler, ran that on about 21% of his possessions, scored 0.947 points per possession, which was in the 87th percentile. So kind of the percentile is what you're going to want to listen to, because obviously a lot of numbers thrown out there, but almost 1 point per possession. That's pretty darn good. And he's ranked one of the better players in the country. You include his passes in there. That's just him scoring. You include his passes. It's pretty similar. He's only in the 81st percentile there. But the reason for that is his teammates did not shoot well on his threes, because he set up a lot of guys, and percentage was not high on those makes. Can't promise it'll be any better at Nebraska, but at the very least, the process is good. He's getting guys open shots. So that's kind of the main deal, and he'll run a lot of pick and roll at Nebraska, but he's also a good spot-up player. About 19% of his possessions, scored 1.265 points per possession, which is in 96th percentile, one of the best in the country. And he improved greatly in his ability to knock down kind of the catch and shoot open three. But what he really likes to do is to attack downhill against those closeouts, to kind of spin and body you up and back his way down and get to the rim once they get the floor space and he's got room to attack. And he's really good at that. Isolation, about 16% of his possessions, 61st percentile at 8.45 points per possession. Not great, but he's capable. You need a bucket. He's a guy that can, in a pinch, go get you something late in the clock. He can at least get a shot off. And again, kind of, you can post him up as well. It's not something that you can do with a lot of point guards, but at 6'7", he's comfortable shooting over the top of smaller defenders, bodying guys up. About 15% of his possessions were post-ups for North Dakota State. scored just under 0.9 points per possession, was in the 64th percentile. So again, it's good enough to be a weapon to have in the tool chest. And finally, in transition, 13% of his possessions, 1.46 points per possession, and in the 71st percentile in the country. So he basically, all those different things that he did at North Dakota State, Nebraska can use those parts of his game. And hearing from all the players, basically everybody is saying the same thing. You can't speed him up. He's really poised with the ball. Derek Walker talked about his leadership on the court, how vocal he is, his ability to kind of say what the players need to hear in key moments. And Hoiberg talked about how he takes the right shots. He wants to set up guys. He wants to kind of be a bit of a pass first guy, but can go get his bucket as well to kind of set that up. And about translating, Hoiberg said he doesn't want him to change kind of his approach at all. He wants him to play his game. He'll have to adjust to the size and athleticism, and that'll happen as they go along. But Hoiberg was impressed when he played against them a couple years ago when North Dakota State came to Lincoln that 2020 season. Griesel didn't have a great offensive game, but he was all over the glass in that game and certainly caught Hoiberg's eye. So, and I'll just read up a quick quote that CJ Welcher gave today when I asked him about kind of the chemistry he's building with Sam. That's my guy. I enjoy playing with Sam. And then off the court, he's a great dude. But on the court, it's always dope to play with him. He always finds me. He doesn't give himself enough credit for how vocal he is. I said this yesterday. He's really vocal in terms of in huddles and even on the court. I could play with him in terms of he just gives me a lot of confidence, a lot of energy. So that's kind of Sam Griesel in a nutshell. Again, if you want to see kind of more how all that looks on the court, all the numbers that I rattled off and all that stuff, go to hailvarsity.com. But I'll turn it over to you and kind of what are your thoughts on Griesel and his fit?
I think first and foremost, you brought the data. I'll bring the storyline. And obviously, if you didn't know, Sam is from Lincoln. He's a Lincoln East grad. He grew up a Husker fan. He's referred to playing for Nebraska as his dream. Said he looked at Nebraska basketball players as a kid like superheroes. For him to get the chance to come home as a grad transfer after Nebraska didn't call out of high school, it's a pretty cool story. And, he's not just some Joe Schmo to fill a roster spot. He's going to be the starting point guard. He's going to be probably the face of the program this year. He's going to be the straw that stirs the drink. But I think more than anything, what we've heard positive about him is the culture guy part of it. And when I talked to him back in the spring, he said that was something that Fred knew right away on his visit was this is a guy who can help us work on, improve, and build a culture here, even if he's just here for a season. And he comes from a program at North Dakota State with Dave Richmond that was a very strong culture up there. They're very tight-knit, did a lot in the community up there. And Sam's already doing a lot being back home in Lincoln. And it's going to be really cool to, see he's probably going to have plenty of fans at every single game. And by the end of the season, he'll probably be, regardless of how the win-loss record, he'll be a favorite here for years to come, I feel like, just because of who he is as a person. And it helps that he's got game too. Let's not forget about that. He's got game. I like the fit. I'm interested to see how he defends, like small, quick, like guards that we'll see in the Big Ten. Like, what does he do when he has to guard Chucky Hepburn? Like, that's just one local example. But I'm excited to see Sam get out there, and I think he's the kind of player, just persona-wise, the way he carries himself, that Nebraska's needed badly in the first 3 years of the Fred Hoiberg era. And I'm interested to see how the story goes for him.
Yeah, all that's well said. Again, Sam's a guy that I covered in high school. Really cool story in terms of he played at OSA, and he was actually on the second team, the national team, his going into his 17U summer, worked his way up, made the leap to the top team for July after a really strong spring, and then kind of turned his play in July into scholarship offers. And that's how he ended up at North Dakota State. So I talked to him at Big Ten Media Days, like kind of parallel to what happened here in college too. Getting kind of overlooked early on by bigger schools, but he kept working. He put in the time to become a better player, and now through his hard work, he's earned an opportunity, kind of last minute here, to move up to the Big Ten and play at his dream school. So yeah, definitely a guy that you're going to really enjoy rooting for. Like you said, no matter what else is happening, it's a good guy who is going to give everything he has to this program. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what kind of season he has, because again, kind of biased here, but he's definitely a guy that I'm personally rooting for, just based on knowing him as long as I have. And you mentioned the defense, and we'll kind of use that as a transition, because I don't know that we're going to see Griesel guarding Chucky Hepburn. I think it'll probably be a guy like Emmanuel Bandabel, who's going to be starting at the 2. And I mean, I probably would have included him more in the off-ball wings, but Fred said like he's basically going to be the backup point guard. Like he's going to handle a lot of the ball handling responsibilities when Griesel is off the floor. And it'd be interesting to see kind of how that plays out, because he did not do much of that at SMU. So he is a transfer from SMU. 6'4", 187 listed at. Last year he averaged 10.5 points a game, 4 boards, little under 2 assists, about 1.3 turnovers. Shot 36% from the field, including 35% from 3 on 6 attempts a game, and shot 82% from the free throw line, but just under 2 attempts a game. So I mean, double-digit scorer 2 years there at SMU, but not terribly efficient. He's a decent shooter, not a great shooter. He's a very willing shooter. In watching the tape, like he's not afraid to let it fly, which Fred Hoiberg likes. That's what he wants his guys to do. But kind of looking at synergy, he averaged 0.908 points per possession, which is 59th percentile. So above average, but not necessarily great. And more than 50% of his possessions were spotting up. And if you've never seen kind of how synergy works, basically spot up possessions include everything where you're just spotting up away from the ball. So that includes both catch and shoot and attack and closeout. So you catch it out there, you put it on the deck and go to the basket as well. And 53.1% of his possessions were spot up last year. And he played with one of the best point guards in the country. So that kind of explains some of that. But he was 0.892 points per possession, right at 50th percentile. So very average in his kind of dominant play type. So you'd like to see that number a little bit better. Again, 35% on a guy that's kind of a designated shooter type. That's not quite what you want, but it's above that break-even point. Like we saw guys that, like a Casey Tomonaga last year, we'll get to him shortly, but he didn't shoot well enough for the role that he was asked to play. Bandamel is closer to hitting that threshold. Transition, he about 20% of his possessions SMU liked to run, and he was part of that. 0.948 points per possession. 39th percentile, unfortunately. So below average. He had some really nice highlight dunks. He can get up kind of when he's got space. They had some alley-oops they threw to him. Had some really nice finishes, but again, just overall, just wasn't great. He showed some promise as a pick and roll ball handler, but he only ran that was on just under 9% of his possessions. It's a really small sample size because he's playing with a really good point guard. Scored 0.794 points per possession, which is in the 62nd percentile. You include his passes, it skyrockets up to 81st percentile at 972 points per possession. And a lot of that is because his teammates hit shots. They were 9 for 16 on spot up threes out of his pick and rolls. So did a good job of finding guys out on the perimeter, and they knocked down the shots, unlike what happened with Griesel. Shot 34.5% on catch and shoot jumpers, 29.8% guarded, 38.7% unguarded, and only 25.5% off the dribble, and only 44.7% at the rim. So that's the thing, like watching him play, he's not super coordinated. Like he doesn't really finish with contact well, doesn't really finish when challenged well or around the basket. And a little loose with the ball at times when he's put on the deck trying to create. So I'm not totally sold on him as a secondary ball handler, but the players seem to be okay with it now, and we'll kind of see how that looks out. I think he's basically the Trey McGowan's replacement as kind of a secondary ball handler, but the primary defender. He is a guy that will get after it defensively. He's long, uses length well. He's not lightning quick on the ball, but he moves his feet or kind of works hard on that end. And I think we will see him as the primary defender on not necessarily just point guards, but whoever the other team's best perimeter player is. I think we'll see Vandemelt take him to start the game. And then they'll kind of figure out the rest of the matchups from there. So that's kind of Emmanuel Vandemelt in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you on the Trey McGowan's replacement. Because I think if I remember right, they added him not too long after Trey announced he wasn't coming back too. So I think that kind of lined up fairly close to one another. Vandemelt, what we heard about him was SMU fans loved him. He's an energy guy. I mean, it sounds like Trey to me. But like you said, it's going to be what him as a ball handler. I think we said this last week too. Him as a ball handler, big question. Fred Hoiberg is kind of a shot doctor, so we'll see what they've done with his jump shot this summer since he got here. And I think they brought him in to start, and he's got a role. I think I think the way I look at Fred's teams, like every role is comparable to a guy that's played for him before. Like it's kind of like, I followed Fred's teams close at Iowa State. I almost went to Iowa State just because he was the basketball coach and I liked watching their teams play. And then he took the Bulls job. So it's funny how life works, right? But the Trey McGowan's I don't know who the Iowa State prototype would be for him. But I would agree with you on your assessment there.
Yeah. So it seems like those are going to be, and he's another 24-year-old. So Derek Walker has company, so he's one of the three super seniors on the team with Sam Griesel and Derek Walker. All those guys are in their extra COVID year. So it's nice having that experience on an otherwise young team. And we'll get into some of those young guys now, because behind those two, kind of the next guys up in terms of playing point guard, handling the ball, is a pair of freshmen. And one of them is a scholarship guy, one of them is not. And Ramel Lloyd Jr. was the top-ranked player in their 2022 recruiting class. Kind of like Griesel, he's a big, kind of versatile guard, listed at 6'6" and 204 pounds. He was the 104th ranked recruit in the 24/7 Sports Composite. Played out there at Sierra Canyon, so played at a high level in terms of prep ball. And kind of used to being part of a big show type deal out there, because it's not your traditional high school out there with Sierra Canyon, with everything that kind of follows around there. But Hoiberg today kind of just highlighted his feel and kind of said he's really coming along, and saying he's playing a lot of point guard right now. And there hasn't been a ton said about him throughout this offseason. Kind of a lot of talk has been about some other guys, but in terms of long-term prospects, like this is a guy that they need to get a lot out of over the next few years. And he doesn't have to play a huge role as a true freshman, but I think having a guy like Sam Griesel to learn from as a kind of another big non-traditional point guard will certainly help him out. And so he's one of those guys that is competing to play some backup point guard minutes.
Absolutely. We've both watched KO for a long time. I'll first time I watched Kale his sophomore year at Ashland Greenwood, I walked into the gym and I asked the friend of mine who had me come to the game which one was Kale. It pointed to this kid who was just built and ripped, and I'm like, that kid's 15. Like, what are we like? What are they feeding this guy? And he, he looks way older than he is, but I mean, he plays smart too. I know CJ, when he was talking to you guys today, said that
I've actually got the quote right here.
Yep, you've got it.
So, and we were talking about Cale Jacobson, who is the other option there. I
zoned out.
Yeah,
I zoned out. You were talking freshman, and I forgot Ramel was on the team. It's late. Look at me go.
No, I see. I was gonna play it off perfectly. Like, that's
good job, Brain. Good job, Brain.
You kind of outed yourself here.
Wow. Yep, I'll admit it. Sorry, Ramel. You're a really intriguing prospect. They really need you to be good. You're used to the bright lights because you played, with Bronny and Amari Bailey and the Sierra Canyon traveling circus. And, when you actually got to handle the ball, you played pretty well at Sierra Canyon. I know you're not listening to this, but I'm going to talk to you like you are. And so, I'm sorry I forgot about you and went straight to Cale Jacobson, Ramel, but I think you've got the tools to, a lot rides on your development. Yep. They've probably told you. They probably haven't told you that, but a lot rides on your development, especially with the way their recruiting's gone and the lack of depth at the point guard spot. They kind of sort of really need you to be good. So I hope you're good. There's my Ramel bit and my apology for forgetting about him.
No worries. So it's Ramel and Cale Jacobson kind of competing for some of those backup point guard responsibilities. And Jacobson, like you mentioned, he's listed at 6'4" and 194 pounds as a true freshman. He was probably that as a freshman in high school or close to it. And it's a guy that kind of probably the most significant thing I can say is that Hoiberg has included him anytime he's talked about his scholarship freshman class. Like, anytime you mention Ramel or Jamarcus Lawrence, Cale is also he mentions Cale alongside with them. So he is technically a walk-on, but I don't think Hoiberg's looking at him as a walk-on, and he's not a traditional walk-on. He had Division I offer. He could be playing in the Summit right now, but wanted to take his chance at Nebraska, stay close to home. He's a guy that tore his ACL, missed most of his junior season, missed his 17U summer of AAU, and he played this last spring as an unsigned senior, and did get an offer from North Dakota out of that. He had some opportunities, but decided to take a shot at Nebraska and try to follow the kind of Charlie Easley path. And it's a guy that he's just a really, really good basketball player. That's kind of the best way I can describe him. I've watched quite a bit of him. I was there. He put up like 44 and 10 or 40 points and 10 points or 10 rebounds as a sophomore against a really good Omaha Roncalli team. That was probably one of the best atmospheres I've been at and covering my 4 years. And then I was there at the state tournament when he set the Class C one record there with I forgot whatever he finished with, 40 whatever it was, but another 40 piece at the state tournament to beat Kearney Catholic, who was a really good team. So
but the biggest play he made was an assist. And he was at the top of every scouting report, every game he played. But the biggest play he made all season was an assist to help AG win a state title on a buzzer beater. So, kid just does the right thing, man.
Exactly right. He's a really smart basketball player, really physical, and again, I think he's still kind of working his way back to peak athleticism from the ACL tear. He definitely wasn't quite there during his senior year. In the spring, but he's continued to kind of work his way back, and I think he's probably feeling really good right now. And CJ Welcher described him as solid today. And that's the same thing that I think a lot of people use. Kind of the rest of the Welcher quote. He makes the right decision probably 90% of the time, 95% of the time. He always finds me, so I like playing with him. Again, we can see what kind of players that CJ likes playing with, because same comment about Sam. But Kale's solid. He guards, he can pass it. He's getting more confident in his jump shot too, so that'll make him a threat as well. So he's definitely stepping into his own. And Kale he's a really physical defender. We'll see kind of how he translates to the high major level in terms of quickness and staying in front of guys, but physically and IQ on the defensive side of the ball, like he shut down basically anybody they needed him to at the high school level. So he's a guy that's not going to back down from anybody. So yeah, we'll see kind of how that whole ball handling picture shakes out. But those are kind of the four main guys that are in that picture. And the reason those are the four main guys is because Mcpherson, who redshirted last year, suffered a knee injury training at home during the summer and will miss the whole season. So he probably would have been in that mix as well as a backup point guard option, and is now going to spend it on the bench. So that means step on up, freshman. You'll probably get a chance to play.
Absolutely. And I have to think Karan would have definitely had a role. Everything we heard about him was about his energy and being your stereotypical, for lack of a better word, tough ass guard from New York. Like that's what we heard about him. Like he was just a tough, hard-nosed guy, and you could see him on the bench last year getting into it during a bunch of games. He was definitely very, very active, very into it, very supporting his guys. So, he for a team that's embracing defense and the get after it mentality. I think Karan definitely would have had a role, but we just have to wish him a speedy recovery.
And Welcher, who was close friends with him since childhood, said he's doing well and he's already walking, coming off the surgery. He said he's ahead of schedule and in good spirits, so that's good to hear. So it's unfortunate. He already redshirted last year and now has to miss a second consecutive year, but hopefully he can kind of get back to full strength here heading into next season. But kind of the last two guys that are in that mix are walk-ons, Sam Hoiberg, who redshirted last year, and Jeffrey Grace III, who redshirted at Arizona State last year. Both guys are redshirt freshmen, and they played together in high school, club ball. So I think Grace went in the portal and was looking around and was like, found an opportunity here at Nebraska with people that he was familiar with the Hoiberg family. And so those are two guys that, again, we'll give them good practice minutes, and those guys will be good teammates to bring that kind of energy off the bench there.
Absolutely. Between familiarity with the Hoibergs and Bobby Hurley having 19 guys on his roster last year, Grace probably needed a new home. And like you said, him and Sam played AAU together with Breakaway back when they were playing, when living in the Chicago area when Fred was the coach of the Bulls. So familiarity always helps. And there's no such thing as too many practice bodies. So,
yeah. So that's kind of the picture there at point guard / ball handler. Again, Bandama will start at the 2 alongside Griesel, and we'll kind of see how the rest of the depth chart plays out. Moving on to kind of the off-ball guards, the wings, the kind of the spot-up shooter types, the more defenders, kind of athlete wing. And we'll start with CJ Welcher, who is going to be very important to this team. And he was the part of that transfer class that landed last year, who played a little bit at Xavier his first year, kind of the COVID year that didn't count. So last year was kind of his second crack at a freshman year. And he played well for Nebraska. He finished averaging 8.1 points a game, shot 46% from the field, including 40.5% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. So that's what he is. He's a 3-point shooter. He shot really well down the stretch of the season. He played mostly as the 6th man last year. Some games he played big minutes, some games he didn't. And kind of just looking deeper into his numbers, his synergy numbers are really good. He was really efficient in his role for the way that Nebraska used him. Overall, 1.049 points per possession, which is in 90th percentile of all players last season. 35%, more than a third of his possessions were spot up, as you might imagine. Scored 1.034 points per possession, which was in the 76th percentile. Transition, not quite as good. He didn't shoot nearly as well, kind of in the open floor as he did in the half court, but that made up almost 20% of his possessions. 1.041 points per possession, but 53rd percentile. And then they ran him off a lot of screens. 12.5% of his possessions were coming off screens. 0.903 points per possession, 49th percentile. So definitely some area for improvement there, but they found different ways to kind of take advantage of that shot. Overall, he shot 39.8% on catch and shoot looks, which was at 50.9% when he was unguarded. So they got him an open look. It was going down half the time. That's a really good number. Only 25.5% when he was guarded. So a little bit more, he's got to kind of get a little bit more comfortable against a closeout, against guys that are kind of getting a hand up on the shot to become a truly elite shooter. But he really did a good job of taking advantage of the open looks that Nebraska generated for him last year. And he shot almost 43% off the dribble as well, and was 61.5% at the rim, which pretty solid number for a guy who wasn't terribly explosive and as kind of more a spot up shooter type. So that's kind of the analytical profile for Welcher. The key thing coming off of that season was the taking care of his body and getting in much better shape. Heck, I mean, they had him playing basically at the backup 4 last year because after Wilhelm Breidenbach went down, they didn't have many options, and he was over well over 200 pounds there. And even though he's only 6'5", he was big enough to hold his own on the block at least a little bit. I don't think they want to do that again. They want him to play on the perimeter, more natural position, and he slimmed down. They've got him listed at 6'5" and 208 pounds. I think Hoiberg said he cut 15 pounds off his frame, completely changed his approach to nutrition, really bought into slimming down, and I think that'll really help him step into this new role as a starter and a guy that they're going to rely on to play heavier minutes than what we saw from him last year. And today, or I guess when we heard from him, he talked about trying to become more of a read and react player as opposed to just a shooter, in terms of being able to read when teams were closing out on him and putting the ball on the deck to make a play, or just recognizing when they're not there and firing and kind of letting it go. So that's, I don't think he's a guy that you're going to be running pick and rolls for. He's not a guy that you're going to ask to ISO a lot, but he is a guy that is going to spot up on the backside. You get the kick out to him, he'll knock that shot down or be able to put it on the deck maybe a little bit better this year, I think is the goal.
Definitely agree. Something I like to do just to maybe get a good laugh every once in a while is look at Ken Palm similar players. To the sites you'll hear us reference plenty throughout this year, or Synergy and Ken Palm. And similar players for CJ last year include Mark Smith, one-time Nebraska recruit who bounced around from Illinois to Missouri to Kansas State and hit the dagger to beat Nebraska and Lincoln, and a fellow by the name of Mitch Ballack. Now it is freshman year Mitch Ballack, but still an interesting comp, I think. Just for a role in a high-powered offense, I think that's not a bad comp, I think. CJ, he down the stretch last year, man, he turned it up a notch, and he kind of silenced some critics with his play toward the end of the year, including the two of us. We were pretty critical about him, but
defensively in particular,
especially. But there's a lot of questions about how this team's going to score. I think one thing we can definitely count on is I think their first option for shooting it beyond the arc, the Fred Hoiberg favorite, is going to be CJ Welcher.
Yeah, and he's like he said, he loves playing with Sam Griesel. He's going to probably be the biggest beneficiary of having Griesel on the team with his ability to kind of invert the floor, to get in the paint, to suck in defenders, and hopefully generate open looks on the perimeter. And so they're going to need a big season out of him. They're going to need a step forward from him, and we'll see kind of what that looks like. Now, the polar opposite type of player we're moving on to next is Juwan Gary, the transfer from Alabama, who cannot shoot a lick, but physical, athletic, plays hard on defense, rebounds the heck out of the ball on the offensive side in particular, and will kind of that he was, I think, when we talked about the starting lineup, he was kind of a potential option at that 4 spot. I've got him lumped in the wings here because he's 6'6" and 215 pounds. Very different player than Wilhelm Breidenbach, who's going to start at the 4, but I figured he kind of belonged here. And looking back at his season at Alabama last year, he's kind of a part-time starter, part-time off the bench. He didn't play huge minutes for them, but he was a rotation player for an NCAA tournament team for a good coach down there, and averaged 6.5 points a game, 3.5 rebounds. Half of those were offensive. Negative assist turnover ratio, didn't really make plays for others, but didn't have the ball a lot either. So he didn't turn it over a ton. Mostly just a play finisher. Shot 51.5% from the field and only 22% from 3 on 1.5 attempts a game. So he's over 60% on twos. Didn't shoot well from the free throw line either, just over 60%. Basically drew 1 foul a game and just under 2 attempts from the line. Looking at his synergy numbers, it's kind of interesting the way they used him. 1.027 points per possession. So while he's not a great scorer, he was effective in his role and efficient. It was an 87th percentile nationally, and which is weird considering looking at some of the individual numbers aren't great. Like spot up, he scored less than 0.06 points or 0.6 points per possession. 10th percentile. Again, he cannot shoot. It does not look pretty. He has some wild misses, so it makes sense that he wouldn't do great in that play type. But he was really effective as a cutter, which about 22% of his possessions, 1.2 points per possession, 57th percentile. And they kind of basically they used him as a big on offense. He played a lot in the dunker spot, which falls under that cut option. They had him kind of flash in the middle against zones when they played him, working baseline or flashing to the middle of the paint. Yeah, they had some good guards, and so when those guys got in a piece of the paint, he's cutting behind that defense and catching those dump offs for layups and dunks. Offensive rebound, almost 20% of his possessions, again scored 1.2 points per possession, which is in the 66th percentile. And transition, he was really good. It's small sample size, almost 14% of his possessions, but 1.4 points per possession which was in the 93rd percentile. He's a big guy. He'll get out and run, and he'll go hard to the rim and finish for you. Almost 80% of his shots came at the rim, and he shot 67% at the rim. So again, guy can't shoot, but he knows that, and he goes hard to the rim when he gets the opportunity there. And there were he's not terribly explosive. Like he has some dunks in there, but he's not a guy that's going to go regularly posterize, finish over the top of defenders. And he doesn't have great touch. Like there's some a few too many clips of him kind of like blowing bunnies around the basket with a little bit of contact or a little bit of contest around there. So, but the numbers overall were pretty solid there. So it'll be interesting to see how Hoiberg kind of works him into this offense, especially when they play, like he'll play alongside a big who isn't really much of a threat to shoot the ball, whether it's Blaze Gato or Derek Walker that he's sharing the court with. But he will be a guy that defensively he'll take on fours, he'll take on some tough threes depending on the matchups there. He again, kind of like Banamel, he's not super quick, but he's really physical and he fights and he'll give you great effort on that end. I think everybody's described him as a dog. He's that guy that every program needs, every winning program needs, a guy that's going to leave it all out there, going to be physical, going to play hard, going to go crash the offensive glass. And he's part of the reason that Hoiberg has kind of changed his perspective on that and is kind of encouraging his guys, go ahead, go crash that glass, because that's somewhere that he feels like they can have an advantage this year, unlike basically every other team we've seen from him. So that's kind of where Juwan Gary falls in. He'll probably be the first or second guy off the bench and play an important role on this team.
Absolutely. We can't forget that he also may have given us the quote of the offseason when he committed.
Yeah.
Quote, "They haven't ever seen a dude like me. No guy in the Big Ten is anywhere near Juwan Gary." End quote. Juwan Gary. So if that doesn't tell you, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about his mentality. I mean, he's got that mentality. You said everyone's called him a dog. Everyone needs, the junkyard guy who's gonna, like just go fight for boards and play physical. And I mean, just Big Ten basketball. There's no other way to describe it. Just Big Ten basketball. Juwan Gary. He'll have a role, and I think some fans are gonna like him a lot too.
Yeah.
Just for what he brings to this team.
I think they're looking at him to kind of fill what they were hoping to get out of Shamil Stevenson. But as we saw, Shamil didn't really have kind of that motor, didn't really have that drive to consistently make an impact. And it seems like Juwan Gary does. So we'll see kind of how Hoiberg finds a way to incorporate him in what he does because of his limitations and maybe some of the roster fit. But like you said, he's going to be important to this team just because of the things that he does bring. And a similar guy might be Denim Dawson, the redshirt freshman, who is a guy that Hoiberg himself kind of unprompted. Like I asked him about the rotation at Big Ten Media Days, and he said the guy he doesn't talk enough about is Denim Dawson. And kind of this was his quote. He's a guy that every time he laces them up, you know what you're getting out of him. He's going to go compete. He's going to dive on the floor. He's going to guard. So you're getting a guy that's been in our system. It was very important for him to get here at semester because I think he learned a lot last year in sitting out and using his redshirt year. So he is the guy that was originally part of this 22 recruiting class, but graduated early and enrolled at semester and used his redshirt last year. So he's around the program. He's got a little bit of head start on those other freshmen. And again, from what Hoiberg said, heading into the Shootaround State game, it sounds like he actually does have a rotation spot. He mentioned him with some of those other guys. So he kind of fits in with that quote, I think, that you read right off top of this episode, that identity that they're trying to have. We'll see. I think there's some shooting potential there, maybe a little bit more so than Gary, but I don't know where he's at this point with that. But he is an athlete. He's a guy that's going to run in transition. He's going to go defend and kind of give you that toughness.
Yeah, I think you could maybe even just from what Fred said about him recently, you could say he's the only freshman who's got a defined role going into the early season. Fred hasn't really spoken at length about any of them. He's kind of just given little like bullet points, but what he said about Denim sounds to be the most promising from that group, at least to me. So
yeah. Definitely. And he's a kind of, again, just a complete change of pace from CJ Welcher. I kind of see him as the backup three. Maybe he can give you some small ball 4 minutes in case of foul trouble or whatever, going small. So we'll see how that kind of plays out, but it does sound like we're going to see him. I think that's kind of, we'll talk about Bleez Cada, but I think Cada, Gary and Dawson are probably the three guys off the bench. And then we'll see what happens in the backcourt with a lot of those other guys who all kind of there's some guys that bring some similar things. Like, do you need another ball handler, or are you good with Vanderbilt in that role? Do you want another shooter? I think that's kind of ultimately going to determine where Hoiberg goes with that kind of last rotation spot. I don't expect him to go 10, 11 deep. 8, 9 is probably where we're looking at. And one of those guys that is looking to be in that mix is Keisei Tomonaga, heading into his second season in the program. Averaged 5.7 points a game last year. Shot 37% from the field, including 33% from three on 3.5 attempts a game. And I think the power of the three ball is that you don't even have to shoot it great to kind of have your numbers come out on the positive end. He scored 0.949 points per possession, which was in the 71st percentile nationally last year. A third of his possessions were spot ups, and he was really good at those. 1.085 points per possession, 86% or 82nd percentile. Wasn't was good in transition as well, which almost more than a fifth of his possessions, 1.25 points per possession, 69th percentile. They ran him off some screens, and he did well in that role as well. 14% of his possessions, 1.16 points per possession, 79th percentile. So this is a guy that can shoot. The problem is he shot 32% on catch and shoot threes, 34% unguarded, 30.5% guarded, 33% off the dribble. Shot selection is going to be the key for him. He took way too many of what he could get away with at the JUCO level. I think if he really does kind of clean some of that up and just really focus in on filling his role and taking the right shots, he can be an asset for this team. But that we'll see kind of if he's willing and capable of doing that. Hoiberg talked highly of the offseason that he had and what he did with the Japanese national team. And he did play a big role for them, had some monster games during their run of international play. But here, heading into the kind of second year at Nebraska, he's kind of fighting for playing time, it seems like.
Yeah. To be honest with you, after last year, I didn't know if Casey would be back. Just because of the way the end of the year went for him. The technical foul at Michigan, complaining about a foul call on him where he ran down the court. Instances like that where it's just you can't be doing that at high major basketball, let alone in the Big Ten, and costing your team points and in some ways maybe even the game. You can't you just can't be doing that. But then I think about opening night last year when he was just putting on a shooting clinic and and people were falling head over heels for him before the season even started. And it's just it's the K-State roller coaster, I guess. Yeah. You never know. It's we're all just along for the ride, and who knows when we'll what his role will be. I mean, I'm sure he'll get some prove it minutes in the non-con to see what kind of role he could maybe earn for himself. But yeah, this is he's definitely a high risk, high reward member of this roster.
Yep. And the guy that he's probably competing with primarily for that kind of sharpshooter role off the bench is the other freshman, Jamarcus Lawrence, 6'3", 185 out of Roselle Catholic, another really good prep program. So he played at a high level at the high school level. Really came on strong, I think, during his senior year. Finished his high school career on a high note. He was ranked 194th in 24/7 Sports Composite in that class. And Hoiberg said today, the kid that can really get it going, and is probably one of the better shooters on this roster right now as a freshman. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of minutes where Tomonaga and Lawrence are both on the court. So it's probably these two guys competing for essentially one spot. If Hoiberg feels like, hey, we need shooting off the bench, these are the guys that he's going to be looking at. And these are the guys that are going to have to kind of earn his trust and show him hey, I can help this team.
Yeah. I really liked Jamarcus Lawrence's high school film. I think he is Fred Hoiberg's dream project. So, as we all know, projects take time. So we'll, I'm sure he'll show some flashes early on, and we'll think too much about it, and we don't know what his role will be afterwards. That would be my guess, but definitely a promising name to keep an eye on. I was really glad they were able to, keep him, and bring him in this year. I think he could be, he's definitely a project, I think. But when you got a guy who led the league in 3-point percentages last year in the NBA, saying you're one of the best shooters on his team, that can't hurt. So.
So kind of just putting a bow on that, kind of all the perimeter players. If it's true that Dawson does have kind of that rotation spot, then we're looking at Ramel Lloyd, Cale Jacobson, Casey Tomonaga, and Jamarcus Lawrence. Probably 4 guys competing for maybe 1.5 rotation spots. Hoiberg said there's probably going to be some situational play this year. Guys that are in the rotation early on might not stay there the entire year. You might have some guys come on later in the season that weren't part of the picture early on at the back end of that roster. So we'll see kind of how those 4 guys shake out in terms of the hierarchy on the team. But that's kind of a look at all the perimeter players. So all we've got left is the big guys in the middle. And for many years, this has been a weak position for Nebraska, but dare I say, this could be a strength of the team this year, heading into 2022, 2023.
Yeah, I mean, what a time when we're talking about a Fred Hoiberg roster, and a thought that would pop into your head is they could use more guards. They've got some big bodies inside, man.
Yeah, so they got some good players, but the problem is they're in a league that has some really, really good players that they're going to have to compete against. But we know one guy that is never going to back down in those matchups is Derek Walker, who really emerged as a key contributor for this team last season. Breakout year, listed now at 6'9", 245 pounds, averaged 9.5 points a game, 6 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.7 turnovers. So got to kind of balance that out a little bit better. But instead of school, he got the record, right? Field goal percentage for the program.
I believe so, yes.
68.3% from the field, which is remarkable. Maybe even more impressive, he shot almost 73% from the free throw line after being a horrendous free throw shooter his first 3 years of college. Between Tennessee and Nebraska, he was, I think, sub 50%. And so to see that leap that he made from the free throw line on top of just playing better all around, I think that showed kind of the work that he put in. And it really paid off for him. Small sample size, he only earned 1 shooting foul a game, basically. But he was just remarkably efficient. Per synergy, he scored 1.119 points per possession, which was in the 96th percentile nationally. And all these percentages are really good. He did a bunch of his work in the post, almost 27% of his possessions, and scored over 1 point per possession, which is really good. Post up is typically a lower efficiency type of play, which is why you see it kind of being cut out from a lot of modern offenses. But he made it worthwhile. Scored 1.028 points per possession, which was in the 87th percentile nationally. And again, this is a guy that's undersized, playing in a league of monsters inside, and he's giving them the work. He also was a heavy pick and roll partner for Alonzo Verge. Those two really developed some nice chemistry, and 23, almost 24% of his possessions were as the roll man. 1.375 points per possession, which was in the 93rd percentile. He was really, really good in the pick and roll last season, and we'll see kind of how the chemistry develops with Griesel. Very different type of pick and roll point guard than Verge was, but hopefully they can kind of get on the same page, because that can be a real weapon for this team. And then cutting, which again includes all the dunker spot, the playing weak side, baseline, kind of the short corner area. 19% of his possessions, 1.333 points per possession, 78th percentile. And then offensive rebounds, almost 9% of his possessions. Again, 1.333 points per possession, which was 85th percentile. Shot 74.5% at the rim. So that is how you shoot 68% overall. So he just was a just kind of incredibly efficient player last year. It's you would have liked to see them find a little bit find a way to get a little bit more volume out of him. Like even if there were too many games there where he just kind of disappeared for stretches, but they played their best basketball when they consistently had him involved. And we even saw midseason Fred Hoiberg changed his offense to run through Walker more, both as a scorer and as a passer. And like I said, he's got to clean up he is a very good passer. Like he can see guys and makes some really nice reads and delivers the ball where it needs to go. But he's got to clean up. He had some careless turnovers where just whether it's a bad read, whether he just kind of lost the handle of the ball, things like that. You want to see a positive assist turnover ratio out of a guy in that role, and I think he's capable of it. So I just continuing to up the volume, find ways to stay involved, and a little bit better ball security, I think, are the keys for Walker heading into this year. But him choosing to come back for that COVID year was a huge win for this program, just both from what he does on the court and just from a personality standpoint. I think he's talked about how he's not as vocal as he'd like to be, but from a leadership by example, from just a culture guy, he was not the reason that they were losing last year. I'll put it that way.
That's pretty spot on. And he's been here with Fred since the beginning.
The only player.
He's the only player, and I think there is now 2 staff members who have been here with Fred since the very beginning, and that's it. So he's been here through thick and thin, and I think probably definitely the first player in Nebraska basketball history who's going to get 3 senior nights. He's got that. Just workman-like attitude. He'll old man game you to death inside, and on this roster, he is the old man. Everyone on the team in his Instagram comments is always calling him uncle or grandpa, and he
will be 25 this season, I believe.
Yeah, that is crazy. But like you said, big win that he stuck around, and unlike last year, now he's got some help inside.
Yeah, and that is in the form of Blaze Keita, who 24/7 had ranked as the top junior college transfer in the country. It's interesting. Like he's listed. Nebraska has him listed at 6'11", 241 pounds. So kind of legit size and frame for a post player. Kind of their tallest guys have all been developmental. Like we saw Eduardo Andre listed at 6'11", but it's probably around 230 pounds ish, and kind of just a longer, leaner guy. Keita is a guy with a solid frame that can kind of hold his own, and it's got an interesting statistical profile. And he actually, so he played his first year at Coffeyville, averaged 10.5 points a game, shot pretty well, over 50% from the field, 73% from the line. He had a knee injury early on. I believe it was a knee, but he missed some time. He only played 18 games last year, but averaged 12.8 points on 52% shooting, 65% from the free throw line. And he is a guy that you kind of dive into the film and the numbers. He plays very differently than I think any player we've seen play for Hoiberg. I've got his JUCO numbers. Synergy has some of his games. I think 14 of his 18 games are on Synergy last year. Scored .959 points per possession, which is in the 82nd percentile. And the thing that stands out, 46% of his possessions were spent in the post. He scored 8.24 points per possession, which is at 54th percentile. You look at his first season in JUCO, it was actually even better and bigger volume. He shot over 50% of his possessions were post-ups and scored .899 points per possession, which was in the 96th percentile that season. And just kind of a big reason for the difference is his hook shot, which he likes. It went down. He made 57% of his hook shots his first season of JUCO and only 36% this past season. But I'll be curious to see what kind of the plan is for him and how Hoiberg uses him. Because, again, 50% post-ups, they basically did not run pick and rolls with him at all. It was all post-up, dunker spot, and crashing the offensive glass. That's all he did, really, for Coffeyville. Kind of his cut stats, 16% of his possessions, 1.281 points per possession, 84th percentile. So again, he has a good feel for kind of hanging in that dunker spot, stepping in, ducking in when his teammate has gotten a piece of the paint and drawn the help defender. His hands are usually ready to catch and finish, and he's got decent touch in there as well. And then offensive rebound, again, like Hoiberg talked about, the influx of kind of physicality on the offensive glass with Juwan, Guri, and Keita in particular. And he 14.2% of his possessions were the offensive rebound variety, but he only scored 8.8993 points per possession, which is in 20th percentile. And there are some issues. He's not terribly explosive. So that's kind of like he'll go crash the glass, but in traffic has a tough time finishing at times. So that's kind of where that comes in. But overall, he shot 70% at the rim. And he's not afraid to take a jump shot. He's not a great shooter, but he's probably better at it than what we've seen from Walker so far. He shot 9 of 21 on jumpers last year and 9 of 18 on mid-range. Missed 3 threes, all 3 of his three-point attempts. So it's a guy that can shoot it a little bit. He'll do a little bit of kind of pop into the free throw line and shooting in the post. His shot isn't pretty. It's kind of a two-handed thing up top, but he's actually got decent shot touch on it. There are a bunch of clips on there where I had no idea how the ball went in just based on the way it looked, but he had enough touch to make the shot. So I think a lot of it will ride on that hook shot. Is he closer to the first-year guy or the second-year guy? And I wonder how healthy he was last season at Coffeyville. I think with an offseason in Nebraska's strength and conditioning program, you'll have him in great shape. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what the role will look like for him this year. I don't think we'll see the Twin Towers look with Walker and Keita both out there that Hoiberg teased back when Walker decided to come back in the summer. But it should form a pretty nice 1-2 punch there in the middle.
Definitely, and I'm really intrigued by him defensively. I think Nebraska hasn't had a defensive big with like his potential in a long time. I think that's where, like, I don't know why or for what reason, but I had an image of the Junkyard Dog defense lineup where 3 through 5 is Denim, Juwan, and Keita. And I'm like, that could wreak a little havoc. Like, it could be fun. So I'm definitely looking forward to, I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum, big guys in the Big Ten and playing inside. And I think Keita defensively could be a big time factor for that.
So yeah, watching his tape, he was more of a shot blocker his first year. Again, I don't know how healthy he was last year. He averaged 1.6 blocks his first season and only 0.6 this last year. Hoiberg talked about he's leading the team in charges in their preseason practices, and you can see that on tape a little bit. I had a couple clips of him taking charges, kind of giving up his body, getting in good position. He does a good job of kind of holding his own in the post. Again, he's not terribly explosive. He's not a leaper that's going to come block 3 shots a game from the weak side, sky in out of nowhere. But he is pretty good at positioning himself around the basket, whether it's defending his own man or sliding over and help. Where he is really going to struggle is guarding guys that can step out and shoot. Watching his tape, he is completely lost guarding stretch bigs. And that's something that Hoiberg will probably want to avoid, having him matched up with a guy that can step out and shoot, because he wants to stay as close to the rim as possible on defense. And there are a lot of possessions where he's standing in the paint as his man is weak side, skip, give up a wide open 3. Sometimes he doesn't even know where his man is. He gets lost because he's so focused on being in help and being in the paint. So there's some issues there that he's going to have to work out on that end. But yeah, defending the post, he's strong. He's fundamentally sound. He holds his position well. He doesn't jump at a lot of pump fakes. He holds his feet pretty well. So there's definitely some things that I think Nebraska, like you said, especially with some of their guys that they're going to defend, he'll be an asset on the defensive side of the ball in the post in particular, and kind of as a backline guy, even if he's not a guy that's going to go block 3 shots a game. So those are kind of your 2-man center rotation there. Wilhelm Breidenbach will start at the 4 alongside Derek Walker. I include him in the bigs because, well, he's 6'10" and moves like a big. He's a very different type of player than Juwan Gary, who's also going to play the 4. We only got to see 10 games of him last year, and it's almost not even fair trying to take away too much from that. I think he is a guy that the adjustment was going to be difficult for him from a physical standpoint. I don't think he was as good of a shooter. Like, I think he had potential as a shooter, but I don't think he was quite the ready-made shooter that maybe Hoiberg talked him up as, just based on what I saw. I didn't think he was a high-volume guy for modern day. I watched a number of their games, and he was much more of a post guy than he was a guy that's taken 3, 4, 5 threes a game. Or games where he took 1, 2 threes, and that was it. So I think there's some adjustment period there that you need to go to, but the potential is there for him to shoot, and that makes him intriguing because he is the one guy with legit front court size. Like, even Gary at 6'6", like, he can't shoot. So this is the one guy that you can put at the 4 spot that has the potential to kind of step out and knock down shots from the perimeter. And then he's also a good passer as well. And Hoiberg talked about how they're going to run offense through Walker and Wilhelm as guys at the high post, some dribble handoff type of stuff, some kind of looking to find back cutters out of that high post. A lot of the stuff that they ran for Derek Walker down the stretch are going to run for Wilhelm as well, I think, because of his ability to make decisions and make the right play. But he's got to shoot the ball better. He only made 3 threes all last season. And that was it. So he's going to have to make a lot more than that. He's going to have to try to stay out of foul trouble a little bit more now. And Derek Walker, last episode we played the clip from Walker just kind of raving over Wilhelm and playing next to him, but mentioned that he still fouls a lot. So that'll be something to watch. He's got to be able to stay on the floor, and I do question his ability to stay with 4s. I think he's probably more of a 5 defensively than he is a 4. But Nebraska's got 3 5s, and he's the best one that has a chance of playing at the 4. So we'll see kind of how much that might be a matchup thing where Breidenbach gets the majority of the minutes against teams that play kind of more traditional front court, whereas we see Gary play more minutes when they're more of a 4-out type of look. So that Nebraska does have that versatility with Breidenbach at 6'10", 231 pounds, who's feeling good coming off the injury. He said kind of like, oh, that's behind him. He's confident now. Heck, he came back and went down and dunked it hard a couple of times in his first full practice back, contact practice. And he's a guy that I think that they're very high on in the program. And Hoiberg has spoken highly of him. And now hopefully this year, A, he can stay healthy, and B, he can kind of find his niche at the college level and produce a little bit more than what we saw from him last year.
Yeah. People don't know what to think about Wilhelm going into this year. If the replies to a tweet of mine today say anything, people don't know what to think. I said
he did look bad for the most part.
Yes,
he had some moments, but yeah.
Yeah. I think so. This is going to sound really far-fetched, but we're going to just throw it out there anyway. He's 3 inches taller than this person I'm about to mention, but I think Fred's ideal vision of Wilhelm is not fat George Niang. In terms of the inside-out game, being a big who can initiate the offense, things of that nature. Because if you go back and watch like early Iowa State George Niang, he definitely wasn't what he is in the NBA, which is just he's there to shoot threes.
Yeah.
He was he was slow. He could barely jump, but he had a little inside out game to him.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, and it's because of how much I watch those teams, talking about, roles on a Fred Hoiberg team is like him chasing ghosts of like Iowa State guys. He's always looking for a George Niang prototype. And I really and truly think that is what he envisions Wilhelm as down the road.
Yep. And he's going to be an important piece. Like if he can give them something, can kind of unlock those lineups. He's got a chance to be a guy that can kind of allow their other players he can kind of help maximize the other guys. Like if he can shoot, if he can make the right passes, if he can clear the defensive glass a little bit and start some of those fast breaks, then you got a chance for Griesel to be really good. Got a chance for Derek Walker to work inside. Got a chance for CJ Welcher to get some good looks playing off of him. So I went on the Varsity Club podcast with Derek Peterson this week as well. So you'll be able to hear some basketball talk on that. I would encourage you to go subscribe if you haven't already. But he asked me who's kind of the most intriguing player on the team. And I went with Wilhelm because we really don't know, like, is he ready to be what they need him to be? He could be a swing guy for this team for all the reasons that I just talked about. So, I'm looking forward to seeing year two for I don't even know if we can call last year one, but looking forward to seeing what he looks like this season. And I hope for his sake, he can be healthy and become the player that they want him to be and think that he can be.
I'm just glad you didn't laugh me off the show with my George Niang comment.
Well, I knew where you're going with it. Because as he said, like, this guy's 3 inches tall. Like, and I thought he's like, is he going with Niang? And it's like the only guy I could think of is kind of a playmaking undersized big. But that's not a bad one. Again, he's 10 inches taller and probably weighs a little bit less. But he's crafty though. He is a crafty player. We'll just see if he can physically kind of make an impact. But just kind of round this up quickly. 2 other guys in the front court. Oleg Koyanet, who redshirted last year, the 7-footer, listed at 7 foot 232. Having a 7-footer as your third string guy, I think he's still a project. I think he's still a ways off from being able to contribute. But at the same time, it's a good practice body to have. They've got some legitimate size that can help them help prepare them for the guys that they're going to see in the Big Ten.
I think we know who scout team Zach Edey is.
Yeah,
I think we can easily assume that. So
you got 6'9", 6'11", and 7 foot as your kind of 3-man center group there. So I think Nebraska has. There have been times where he probably would be playing, especially in the very recently. And he's your third string guy. So that says a little bit about where the depth is right now. And then Henry Burt out of Elkhorn South joined as a walk-on, 6'4", 216 pounds. Just continuing the Elkhorn South walk-on tradition. They got to have somebody walking on out of that program base. And I forget how many years in a row this is now, but keeps it going.
Yeah. Johnny, Justin, Jace. First Elkhorn South.
And now Henry.
And now Henry. So that's it's the Elk South pipeline to Lincoln. But that we touched on everyone. And even the guys I forgot about, we touched on them. So I admitted it, though. I was honest. Honesty is the best policy. And Ramel, I know you're never going to hear this, but I am still sorry. So,
but like I said, go to hailvarsity.com. More in depth, touched on everything that we broached here on the podcast. Wanted to get you ready for what you're going to see in that exhibition. Hoiberg said they're going to try to play everybody as much as possible outside of Cron Mcpherson. Everybody else is healthy. Everybody else is going to get a chance to see the floor, and they're still trying to figure out the rotation. So This might be the longest episode we've ever done, but there are 17 players on the roster, and we wanted to make sure we did touch on everybody. So we'll call that a podcast, I guess, and we will regroup after the Shadron State game when we get a chance to see these guys play in person for the first time.
And then we get to look forward to Colorado exhibition part 2.
And you said you're going to be there.
I am going to be there. I'm headed out to see a friend of mine in Denver that weekend, and it just so happens that Nebraska is going to be in the area too. So I'll be boots on the ground in Boulder for that exhibition, but we will talk more about that when you hear from us next week.
Yep. Until then, this is the Nebraska Shootaround podcast.